Good morning. We're here for our weekly webinar, and the topic today is methods for introducing urban resilience and climate action topics in STEM education. And the guest speaker today is Carissa Champlin. I'm passing it over to you. Thanks for being with us here today, Carissa.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Thanks for everybody for joining today. My name is Carissa Champlin. I am a researcher, actually a third-year postdoc at the Faculty of Technology, Policy, and Management. And I have been working since 2019, primarily funded through the 4TU Center for Resilience Engineering, where we have multiple pillars to this community, but I worked mainly under the education pillar to run the SURF Urban Resilience Project. So this was an open education initiative of the 4TU Center for Resilience Engineering. And since I believe this is Open Education Week, this is a nice opportunity not only to talk about the topics of bringing these grand challenges into STEM education, but also to really highlight how open education can play a really important facilitating role in that domain, in that process. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Also, I am by trade an urban planner. So I want to also give the caveat that I'm not an education expert and do lean heavily on people like Naomi and others for a lot of the work that I do in the education domain. But I do like to consider myself someone who builds toolkits and methodologies. And so I also want to show how working on methods in the realm of education can be really helpful in bringing these grand challenges into the STEM domains. So with that, I will now share my screen. And I hope that we leave plenty of time after my presentation to have a really fruitful conversation as well. So, So here we go. Just briefly, of course, what is STEM education? Well, we're talking about the sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I also added an extra M for medicine, not only because this is a kind of a broader notion of STEM disciplines for education, but also to really highlight the work that the orientation of the TU Delft, also in the context of convergence with Erasmus MC and Erasmus University on, among others, the topics of medicine, AI, and the Resilient Delta Initiative, which is one of the convergence initiatives that I'm directly involved in as a methodology specialist. But I want to talk to you about how methods for bringing the grand challenges of urban resilience and climate action, which are two strategic grand challenges of the TU Delft, how to bring this to our students. So let's start with the challenge that we're dealing with here. We have big agendas. Why do we have big agendas at the TU Delft? Well, that's because we're going with the times, right? We all recognize undeniably that our world is becoming increasingly shock prone and vulnerable. I think that moving from one crisis, the COVID health crisis, into now a political and wartime crisis situation really highlights that not only do we have these long-term stresses like climate change that we're dealing with, but we're becoming more prone to shocks on our global systems and also, of course, on our urban cities and regions. So this is something that, of course, science has an important role to play in tackling these grand challenges, and also in educating the next generation right now and how to deal with these challenges. However, a big challenge that we have within science and academics is that over the decades, I like to say that it has not always been like this. I'll give an example of the Lunar Society in Birmingham. That was a very transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary early movement in the 18th century. But in past decades, we've really become quite siloed in the way that we deal with academics, the way we deal with science. and we've become quite disciplinary focused, but this doesn't really work for tackling grand challenges. So now we really need to move towards interdisciplinarity, breaking down the silos, and orienting towards these grand challenges. So this is not only a challenge for our scientists, but also for how we educate now and in the future, and how we reform our educational systems and curriculum. So I want to show you several different methods that we're already working with now. We've been working with within the context of the 4TU Center for Resilience Engineering, primarily as an example for how to make the link between these different disciplines and grand challenges of urban resilience and climate action. The first is linking the disciplines to the grand challenges. So from small to large, let's say. Here is an example that I will take from our Open Education initiative. You can actually find our community, Urban Resilience, on the EduSources website, so EduSources.nl. And here we have over 150 different open education resources that we collected from our 4TU community, but also linked to other open education materials like MOOCs on the OCV website. In this example, what I've done for my own teaching is I've taken an open educational resource from a colleague about risk and resilience, and I'm linking this to a transport course that I'll be teaching on transport resilience. So bringing this very specific transport discipline into the frame of resilience with the aim of giving students resilience lenses to look at transport systems. So that's one example of how we can link from discipline to grand challenges using open education resources. But we also need to link across disciplines, not only engaging in interdisciplinary science, but also interdisciplinary education. And a lot of one way that we can do this is through co-creation. So within the urban resilience projects of the 4TU, we worked with 16 different tenure trackers resilience tenure trackers, and also with students to co-create a game that we call Relasticity. And Relasticity explores shocks on an urban system related to different subsystems of the city. So we worked with energy and cyber system experts to develop measure cards for how we could respond to a shock in the energy sector, on the transport sector, on the built environment sector, on urban water sectors. And we also, of course, looked at cascading effects across these different sectors, and also how shocks can have impacts on all of those different systems. So this is an example where we're trying to link knowledge across disciplines by co-creating an interdisciplinary type of tool like a game. Games are excellent also for communicating about complex issues and looking at these things in a very experimental, exploratory way. So I think that the Rector Magnificus of TU Eindhoven said it best when he said, successful collaboration is oftentimes organized around a common field of application or a common methodology. So creating educational tools like games can be an excellent way to collaborate on a common methodology, or can be an excellent methodology for collaboration. The third method that I'd like to share with you is how we link these grand challenges to the specific disciplines. And I would like to think that this is a particularly challenging sort of way. It's one thing to take the transport discipline and talk about how we define resilience, how we might define resilience for transport systems. But I think it's much more challenging to take our disciplinary knowledge and bring it together in order to teach about how to deal with grand challenges like urban resilience and climate action. So one thing that we've been doing is we've actually been working on game adaptation. And this is an example here where we took the game I just showed you, Relasticity. We took the measure cards from that game. In this case, you can see the water cards that we used. And we had a group of 170 students at a summer school hosted by the faculty, Baukunde faculty. And we had them engage in an online activity where they took the measures, water measures in this case, from the game, and we asked them to explore these measures and change the measures, adapt them based on topics of distributed and intergenerational justice. So our measures were very much engineering measures. How do we build dikes, for example, to prevent flooding? But then we asked the students, well, what would this mean in terms of how to build or where to place the dikes in a more socially just way? So this is an example of where we really need to bring different disciplines, whether it's ethics and hydraulical engineering together in order to tackle grand challenges in an integrated sort of way. And I also want to mention on that last method that it was really important that we could work with students, in this case from 73 different countries, to gain their knowledge and their kind of experiential knowledge about coming from different contexts around the world and applying those to expand our scientific understanding of what justice might mean in the context of resilience. The last method I want to mention is really bringing the topic of facilitation as a new discipline to students. So tackling these grand challenges, integrating knowledge is something that we really need to understand better, how to do this effectively, how to link knowledge across domains, how to build common vocabularies. And this is not only a challenge for scientists now, but we also need to, as we're learning how to do this, bring this into the classroom so that students now and in the future are prepared to not only understand research and how to work in their own domains, gain scientific knowledge in their own domains, but also understand how their design interventions, for example, as engineers or architects or urban planners, have impacts on other fields. So to conclude, I want to quickly just go through 4 points that I would propose for educational reform so that we can orient education along with as we're actively or reorienting our scientific agendas towards these grand challenges. First of all, it would be having education in a leading role. I just wanted to show you this animation of our online exercise to show just how much information and knowledge we collected from this activity. So co-creation, experimentation in the classroom, and also engaging students as sources of data, but also in data collection, whether it's on an online platform or in the field, I think is super important for us as scientists to collect knowledge, but also for students to gain experience. Also, advocating. I think I see a lot of barriers from running an open education project, a lot of barriers that we need to break down, not only on the side of bringing grand challenges to STEM education, but also for promoting open education so that we can more easily share this expertise and knowledge from our different disciplines with one another and merge these topics in our education and teaching. And this is another example, sorry, of education in a teaching role, where this is the Urban Resilience Academy Tanzania. Here you can see this is actually outside of our own community, but it's a great example of how students are being taught in geoinformation techniques. They go out into the field to apply these techniques, and they're literally mapping the world. And they're providing their data sets online open access. So I think this is an excellent example of education being in a leading role. Upscaling, I believe this is my, last two slides. So upscaling, how do we, take these, how do we systemize this linking of domain-specific knowledge to our grand challenges? Maybe we have success in linking one domain, but how do we link across all disciplines? And also, I think that there's a real big challenge in adopting people's open education resources because it requires actually a lot of adaptation of other people's educational resources that they share with the world to bring it into your own classroom. And finally, we need to better understand the barriers and opportunities to bringing these challenges and to changing our education. So a lot of institutional barriers, for example, tenure trackers that we worked with, they don't, a lot of their open education activities do not count towards their tenure track. So how can we make this a metric for them? How can we valorize contributions to open education so that we can share our knowledge for tackling these grand challenges? And with that, I just want to invite you, hopefully, if you're willing, in a few weeks to participate in a market survey that we're preparing right now so that we can better understand from a lecturer's perspective some of these challenges that you're facing or that might prevent you from bringing these big grand challenge topics into your own coursework, but also maybe barriers or challenges you might be having in the realm of adopting open education resources in your own teaching. So with that, I'll stop sharing and want to thank you for your attention, and I'm very interested to hear from you any questions you have.
Thanks for sharing all that. I am actually really curious because I liked seeing what you had in that mural board, and I'm kind of curious to see if we could see a little bit more of what you've created because it seemed pretty elaborate. Even if we don't see the collaboration part, I'm just kind of curious. I liked how you designed that mural board. Do you mind sharing that so we can see a little bit more detail? I don't know if anyone else had any questions right away to jump in, but I was really curious on that one.
I can open up the PDF. So 1 second. And then I'll try to zoom in and out of this. So this is the main part of the board. And it looks super busy, and it was super busy, but we this is because we had 170 students. So what we did was we had groups, we had clusters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we used 6 of these clusters with 6 groups each. So we divided all the students into something like 36 groups, roughly. And then each line was a different group. I'm trying to, there we go. And because we had this Reelasticity game, which is available open source online, the Reelasticity game is a big game, and I like to describe it as a meta model. And it's actually too big, I think, to play, certainly in an online setting with students. But so what I often do, especially during COVID, was take pieces of the game and use it as a didactical tool that we can structure an activity around. So in this case, the only thing from the game that we used was these measure cards, which have a description of your response. So let's say that there's a flood, then this card would be, let's see, I think adaptation card where you respond by adapting your urban system to create promenades that can be flooded. So what we asked the students to do was first, because this was a summer school, it was a pity that it couldn't be hosted in The Hague as it normally is, well, in Delft, but with Case Study The Hague, was we gave them in step 1 just the opportunity to say hello, get to know each other, talk a little bit about where they're from, whether it was from India or Egypt, and to create a common context for a fictional context that maybe has something to do with their own communities or where they're from, a context that this event or this shock might happen. So all of these groups use the shock heavy rain, right? They had a heavy rainfall shock on their system. And so they first just create a fictional context. And then in step 2, they had to go find their card, right? So this group 1, their measure was the floodable promenades. And they had to also look at the impact. So there's indicators on these cards, right? So it's very good for the economy, very good for society, not so good for the environment, for nature. And then they had, in steps 3 and 4, they had to discuss two topics of justice, distributive and intergenerational justice. So they had to explore, who are the actors that would be most vulnerable to a heavy rain event. And then they had to also think about future generations. So we build these floodable promenades. How would this affect people in our city 50, 100 years from now? Then in steps 5 and 6, let's see. Then they had to propose or create their new engineered measure. As you can see, not everybody finished this activity. It was the first time we ever did it. We did it on an online setting, and time was definitely the critical factor. But some did. Some did manage to, also evaluate their new measure. So what would it cost? How would it perform in terms of people, planet, profit? And then finally, the other groups of this cluster got to vote on what they thought was the best measure. So yeah, that's what we did in a nutshell. And yeah, other than the time factor, we were really happy to see that so this kind of visual, engaging sort of activity also, that they really enjoyed it and that they learned something from it. Although, of course, it's not a nice replacement for actually being there at a summer school, meeting people from 73 countries. So.
Yeah, it seems pretty elaborate. I'm really curious how they enjoyed it too. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Carissa?
If not, I have a question for you.
Sounds good.
Well, I'm just curious, as we open up the conversation, I had a chance to meet Herman and Roel, but I'm just curious from each of you coming from different parts of the university, where do you see the space, and also what kinds of barriers do you see for connecting what you're teaching to these grand challenges? So it can either be the opportunity or the challenge, or both. Roel, I saw a gesture, but yeah.
Yeah, you're asking too, so we're both politely waiting, probably. See, for me, it's so I joined TU Delft 1.5 years ago, and I'm coming from the Applied University, HBO. And in HBO, it's very common, or very common, maybe not, but it's more common to have open projects, big projects related to industry, companies, and to be interdisciplinary. And actually, I was leading the mathematics and physics departments there, and those were two subjects that were a little bit less active in this area than other subjects, but I saw it happening around me a lot. And now I joined University Delft, and I noticed that the physics department hardly does this. Not to say they don't do this. They're stuck on their own isle. They do their own stuff, and this is related also with the fact that a lot of the teachers, they just teach a single subject within the curriculum, and that's their specialty, and they have a very, very clear idea of what they want to teach the students within this subject, and it is related to their own research, and they want to get the contents across, and they're not so much occupied with the question, okay, what will the student or society do with this during the lifetime of the student? No, I want to get my specialization across, and I want them to get interested in my type of research. And I find this very interesting because I can fight whatever I want. Well, fighting is never a solution, but I can press and pull and do whatever I want as a program director. I'm never going to be able to move people because I want them to move. That's not going to happen. So I have to have incentives, and I have to connect to their own world, to the world of the lecturer, to be able to have them move and to change the perspective of their courses. And that's what made me join this presentation. And what I liked very much of your presentation was you were not focusing so much on contents and knowledge, but you were actually you had this saying of the Rector Magnificus of Eindhoven, and you were focusing, okay, let's see whether there is something which appears in both our worlds, in which we can bring our own package, our own knowledge from two different student communities, or multiple different student communities. Keep them different, they all have their own background, but let them struggle with the same problem because they can face it from different sides. And I think that's a really interesting perspective that I want to pursue and see whether I can implement that somewhere. But it's not so easy to make these connections across the campus as far as I'm concerned. Herman, what is your experience on this?
You're muted. Yeah.
Maybe Carissa wants to hear some other voices than those of you and me. But just when you were explaining, I was remembering a same goal as you explained in postgraduate course, where we had 4 modules: law, finance, technology, and let's say practice, or so more development, we call it. And those 4 groups were working in their own world. They had their hours, they had their teachers, they had everything. Then we said, how can we now bring them together? And one of the things we did last year was we choose a site, a site in the city of Kortrijk in Flanders that is in redevelopment. It's a huge site close to a railway station. We made a tour. We were invited by the owner. We made a tour. The developer made his story. We asked the chief architect of Flanders to join us there. But, and that was what I was thinking when you were saying, we asked also 2 representatives of each of the blood groups, the 4 blood groups, to come to the site and to explain in a kind of pitch mode, 5 to 10 minutes, what they think is the issue to redevelop this site for the oncoming generations. So what we did is, of course, you preferred the students to do that, but our first goal was to have the teachers present and to force them to go from their silo into practice and to apply their knowledge. And then we had a very interesting session where the schepen, I don't know in English what it is, but so the one in the municipality who is in charge of urban planning, he joined with the owner, and then the different professors came into a debate about innovation techniques to bring this development further. So people from legal sciences all of a sudden started thinking about new laws that we need, new systems we need to, etc., etc., etc. And then it became really like, wow, this is for the first time we broke through the silos. So different setting, and force them, apply external speakers, so the full arena of tricks to start breaking through the silos. Yeah.
And was that a one-time sort of event, or?
Yeah, it was one, but we will repeat it now in May. And now we will prepare it much more in depth, because people felt it was nice. So there was something like 65 students joining us during that walk, because it was a huge site. So we made a walk during a full afternoon, and we made stops, and there everyone explained a bit. So we will repeat that, but now we will prepare it more in detail. So that means that everyone is now confident, feels like understands the value. Now we will prepare more in depth, etc., etc. And step by step we grow. We have other initiatives as well in that course, but just to give you one example.
I think that yeah, I definitely agree with you that this quote of the Rector Magnificus, he said it probably 2 years ago to our community, but I always am reminded of it, that having these common methodologies or common fields of application, whether it's a case study, these means of integrating are really important. And building games together, building educational resources, working together on a case study, these are all ways to integrate and extremely helpful. But what I'm also reminded of is people like you, Roel, who I think I'm finding in my own work on transdisciplinarity so important. There are people like Herman and myself who work in an urban context where we've always been very systems oriented in terms of, understanding hyper-connected urban systems and interdependencies. So we're kind of programmed to think like that, but we need advocates who are deep in the specializations, but have an interest who can open the door to these disciplinary specialists. I also have another one at hydraulic engineering who's very much like this and a part of our community. And I'd love to invite you to join, to think with us, not only on the academic side, or not only the education side, but also the research side, for how we can put our tentacles out into these different disciplines as well, for knowledge integration. Yeah, 2 really good points. Thanks a lot for that. Oh, Herman, also, sorry, I wanted to mention to you as well, in terms of integration activities, that Baukunde, the entire faculty, is setting up a new community on EduSources for open education spatial data. So they're going to use the Open Education platform to collect, I believe, data sets and all and other forms of open education materials for the entire faculty. So if you're interested in being a part of that, I can put you in contact with the person leading that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, would be nice. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, sure.
I did have one question, but it is a changes topic. So did anyone else have any other questions or comments more related to the current conversation? No? All right. So the question I have is, because you talked about normally the students either come to Den Haag or Delft, and you did this kind of replacement more in Miroboord. In the future, will you continue to do or reuse some of that, or will you fully go back to what you've done in the past? So I'm kind of curious to see, what you might keep or reincorporate when they're back in person more fully.
Yeah, well, I think that question also kind of fits the times as well, in terms of this discussion of the TU Delft of the hybrid work policy. And I do think that the on-campus teaching will be important, and also this summer school will be hosted on campus. Luckily, this is the Spatial Justice and Just Transition Summer School led by Roberto Rocco at Baukunde. And so this summer, we're really happy that it can be done on campus. So we will be making a physical adaptation of our digital adaptation for the summer school. But it's such a unique opportunity to just jump on a call with 170 people all around the world and collect knowledge like this. So I certainly think there's a space to continue using these online platforms just the same way as, we'll probably continue to jump onto hybrid conferences in the future so that we can engage with more communities of science. So I think it's both. Yeah, I think we'll be doing both.
Nice, good to hear that. And I think Irene?
Yes, hey, thank you very much for the lecture presentation. It was really nice. I couldn't help but having this negative voice in my head saying, yeah, you're talking about all these things that we can do that are amazing, yeah? But you're talking about all these challenges that we're facing, like breaking the silos and getting people to work together, which I've been in TU Delft long enough to know that that's a huge problem. But then that next to climate action, I see the time frames for both of them are not matching. So we need urgent climate action. But we're talking about, to me, it seems like a really long process of, changing the culture in academia. How do we deal with that? What's your opinion on that?
It's a very good point, and I think the critical voices are there to drive us. And well, for one, I do think that I agree with you. I'm concerned that the science of this is so far behind, and traditionally, we do the science and then we bring it into the classroom. But so that's why I wanted to also share in my presentation. I think that education can be an accelerator. So we can experiment with things before bringing them to, let's say, we can experiment with new methodologies with students in a classroom before we take them to practitioners who can be quite hesitant to adopt something and take a risk. We can we can engage students as in data collection, not only as having more people in the field, but also they're not just students, they're adults, they are people with experiential knowledge. And if we arrange education in an interdisciplinary way, we're also bringing different disciplinary expertise, even though it's somewhat junior. Still, we're bringing it into a classroom together and we're integrating in the classroom. So I really believe that transdisciplinarity is the way forward to accelerate how we deal with these grand challenges as an academic community.
Okay.
So that's one. I think there are more, but I'll just stay with this one for now.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
Very good question, though. Yeah.
Yeah, Irene, what I would suggest is that we also trust on the integration capabilities of our students. So when we see every day in industry, which is the world where they go after 5 or 6 years they are with us, they become part of the reality that integrates every day, stuff every day. So in that way, I'm not too concerned, I can fully understand a very skilled professor who is very famous in his field, that he wants to pass his knowledge, and that he says, no, I will bring them knowledge first and then we will integrate. Okay, Bouwkunde chooses to integrate and sometimes forgets to bring the knowledge. Yeah? That's a little bit what we fail on. So I can imagine that it's not the one or the other. I think it's the one and the other. We also have to trust the power of students when they are 25, 30 years old and they have left us already, that they start understanding the broader picture and they have learned skills. But we have to confront them with the integration issue. But when they do not really do it at the level that we expect, I'm not so scared that it will not work when they are 3 or 5 years further. So we have our role also to bring existing knowledge to the new generations. and to trust them that they will build from there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you say, and if I may say something, that we still have time, and something that was also popping up in my head right now. So I've been working with the green team in Faculty of Aerospace Engineering already for a while, also dealing with the Green TU. So I see all these students so passionate about changing things and about, you know, tackling all these challenges that I wonder, should we not listen to them more? And I also get the feeling that, you know, they are very passionate about all this stuff, but they get into like our system, and the farther they are into our system, the more they lose their passion. That's the feeling that I have. But again, I've read way too much about climate change, so I tend to be a little bit pessimistic about our future, but that's how I see it. So I wonder, should we actually change things? Like, for instance, I'm now at Aerospace Engineering together with Civil. We're trying to put together a student-centered course where we let the students talk and discuss about their responsibility as engineers to society. And shouldn't we get, I don't know, get out of the way a little bit? I don't know, this is a little bit probably crazy, but this is the idea that was popping in my head.
Yeah, I don't know if by getting out of the way, I definitely think that we should also find ways that we can be more open as the instructors, as the coordinators, course coordinators, and up and up and up. But my experience from within the 4TU resilience community is it does vary by university and by department, and really the people who are really dedicated to making the change, it's already starting on a very individual level. So for finding that space to bring in these grand challenges in a clever way. For example, you know, maybe they don't have room to teach resilience, but they can use resilience as a topic or as a case for teaching what they are obligated to teach, for example. And an even bigger example, our case study work package leader just happened at Civil Engineering, just happened to be leading a master's course, an integration master's course, where she took our project of creating education materials on urban resilience and she gave it to the students. So they created trend reports, case studies, and then they created in groups 10 different games that were spin-offs of our elasticity meta model. And the students absolutely thrived. They loved it. They were so engaged. It was such a positive experience for them. And I think that their understanding of resilience and its importance is going to really have an impact on everything that they do, the way that they view their disciplinary studies, but also their future careers. So I definitely think putting them in the lead is a great opportunity.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jed.
Hey, thanks. Irene, I've just got a question, if I may, and I don't know, it's a bit cheeky maybe. So normally when we think about starting to plan a course, we start with the course object, or the learning objectives for that. So I love the idea of student kind of centered, focus driven courses, but who would then set the learning objectives for the course that you have in mind, and how would you ensure that you reach that goal if you're being kind of 99% hands off?
Yeah, so but for this particular course, so it's actually a course that we are taking from TU Berlin. So it's a blue engineering course. So the learning objectives are already set, and they were set by, actually, he was a postdoc when he developed this course, so someone at TU Berlin. The course is run by students, So that actually there's the students taking the course are free to, or feel free to, talk and discuss and say what they think. And then the learning objectives are actually checked, so they don't have exams. Obviously, it would be really weird to have an exam in a course like this, but they have to do work. So they have to write a diary. They have to actually develop modules for new courses in the future, new courses like this one. So we can actually at the end of the course check whether the objectives have been met, basically. But actually, we ran a pilot of this course in civil engineering in Q1 and Q2 this year. So I think it might be interesting for one of these sessions to have the TAs who run the course explain this to the community, because I think it's quite cool as well. But sorry, I don't want to hijack this whole thing. I'm sorry.
I just added another example for head to the, sorry, the sun's really coming in, to the chat. So this is another example in the case of the Leapfrog course, which I just described, where the students created all these case studies and game concepts. The entire teaching guide is available online. So you can see it was a very structured course, but the students were, I'd say, in full control of the output, which is the teaching materials that they created. But they, they even were introduced to Scrum methods for going through their developing their games. So they had to follow a Scrum methodology for working together in a team. And you can find everything on that link. Just look for Martina Rutten, who was the instructor, and that's where you can find the full teaching guide.
Fantastic, so thank you both.
Yeah, it can be a student-led initiative that's fully structured and derived from learning objectives.
Thanks. Irene, if you decide to set up something similar in aerospace, I'd love to work with you on that. I think we're really interesting.
Yeah, we're already on our way to doing it. We already got a course code, so I think it's going to happen next academic year. We're going to offer it as an elective together with civil. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will let you know.
Do.
Well, another nice example of interdisciplinary collaboration happening right now. So.
Yeah, and it's actually with Martina Rutten. It's really funny that you mentioned her, because she's behind all these experiments, let's call it this way. So it's really nice.
Okay, nice. Yeah. The movement is growing.
Very nice. I'm gonna start to give the topic for next week, so I'm gonna add it to the chat just so you're aware of what's coming up. But next week's topic is going to be the course with 6 faces, adapting a course for different contexts and teaching methods. And this is with John Allen. So he will be the guest speaker for next week. And I'm going to start wrapping it up for the recording purposes. So did anyone have any other last comments or questions for Carissa for the recording part? If not, that's okay. All right, I'm going to end the recording. Thanks, Carissa, for being with us here today. We really appreciate it. And it was very interesting to hear your topic here.
Thank you very much. Can I make a short request? Just for those who are here, thank you. Yeah, we had hoped to have this market survey available so that I could just send you the link right away. But reality has pushed our deadline back a little bit. But if you're open to it, I'd like to make note of your names and invite you to fill in the survey once it's ready. Would you be willing? Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot. And thank you very much for your interest in the topic and your very interesting questions and conversation. It's been nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, thank you again for speaking with us here today.